My name is Jasmine Parker. I'm 28 years old, and I never thought my own sister would destroy my life while I was serving our country overseas. After 18 months in a military contractor position, I came home to find an empty lot where my childhood house once stood, holding a foreclosure notice dated 6 months ago. My sister Chelsea had secretly sold my home using forged documents, drained my bank accounts, and told everyone I was dead. As I stood there in shock, my phone rang with Chelsea's number, her voice sweet as honey asking where I'd been hiding. She had no idea I'd just discovered her betrayal. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you're ready for a tale of revenge that'll make your jaw drop, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now, let's get into the shocking discovery that changed everything. The taxi ride from the airport should have been filled with excitement about coming home, but instead it became the most devastating moment of my life. For 18 months, I'd been working as a communications specialist for a defense contractor in Eastern Europe, counting down the days until I could return to my cozy 3-bedroom house in suburban Denver. I'd bought that house with my military savings and VA loan benefits, pouring my heart into every renovation project during my leave periods. It represented everything I'd worked for, my stability, my future. When the taxi turned onto Maple Street, I initially thought the driver had made a mistake. Where my house should have been, there was nothing but an empty lot with overgrown weeds and a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for months. My heart started racing as I grabbed my bags and ran to where my front door used to be, finding only concrete steps leading to nothing. That's when my neighbor Agnes Murphy came running over, her face pale with shock. "Jasmine. Oh my God, you're alive," she gasped, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Agnes had lived next door for 30 years, and had watched me grow up. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know about what had happened while I was away. "Agnes, where's my house? What happened here?" I demanded, still clutching my deployment bag like it might anchor me to reality. She explained through sobs that 3 months into my deployment, my sister Chelsea had shown up with legal documents claiming I'd died in an overseas accident. Chelsea had produced a death certificate, power of attorney paperwork, and insurance documents, all apparently legitimate enough to convince the authorities. She seemed so heartbroken, Agnes continued, wringing her hands. "She said you'd wanted the house sold quickly because of your debts, and that she needed to settle your estate. The whole neighborhood came to your memorial service that she organized. We planted those roses in the empty lot in your memory." My legs gave out as the full scope of the betrayal hit me. I sat on those concrete steps, staring at the wilted roses that marked my supposed grave, while Agnes explained how Chelsea had sold the house to a developer, who immediately demolished it for a commercial project that never materialized. The lot had been sitting empty ever since, tied up in the developer's bankruptcy proceedings. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and checked my bank accounts for the first time since my return. Empty. Every single account I'd carefully built up over years of service had been drained. My savings account, that had contained $43,000, showed a balance of $12.57. My checking account, my emergency fund, even the CD I'd been saving for a new car, all completely emptied. That's when my phone rang with Chelsea's number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Jasmine," she exclaimed with false enthusiasm. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick. I came by your house last week, and it looked abandoned. Are you okay?" The audacity was breathtaking. Here she was, pretending to be the concerned sister while sitting on the proceeds of stealing my entire life. "Chelsea," I said slowly, my voice barely controlled. I just got back from deployment. I'm standing where my house used to be. There was a pause, then she launched into a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Oh honey, didn't you get my emails? There was a family emergency. Your house was in foreclosure, and I had to make some quick decisions to save what I could. I've been trying to reach you for months. She claimed she'd tried to contact me through military channels, that there had been a medical emergency with her daughter Emma that required immediate funds, that she'd only sold the house to prevent losing everything to the bank. Every word was a lie, and we both knew it. I had been in regular contact with my unit's family readiness group. My mail had been forwarded properly, and I knew for a fact that 8-year-old Emma was perfectly healthy, because Chelsea had been posting photos of their luxury vacation in Mexico on social media just weeks earlier. We need to meet, I told her, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Today. As I hung up, Agnes handed me a manila folder she'd been clutching. I saved these for you, she said quietly. Something about that memorial service didn't feel right, so I kept copies of all the paperwork Chelsea showed us. Inside were photocopies of the forged death certificate, the fraudulent power of attorney, and property transfer documents. Even to my untrained eye, they looked suspicious with inconsistent fonts and obvious alterations. Standing in that empty lot, surrounded by evidence of my sister's betrayal, I realized that losing my house was just the beginning. This was war, and Chelsea had fired the first shot. But she had no idea what she'd started with someone who'd spent 18 months learning exactly how dangerous underestimating your enemy could be. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Brennan and Associates with Agnes's folder of documents clutched in my hands and a determination that surprised even me. Harold Brennan, a silver-haired attorney who specialized in fraud cases, looked over the paperwork with the experienced eye of someone who'd seen every con in the book. This is sophisticated work, he said, adjusting his reading glasses as he examined the forged death certificate. Your sister didn't do this alone. The notary seal here belongs to Jennifer Walsh, and I recognize this particular type of document fraud. We've seen her work before. Harold explained that Jennifer had been under investigation by the state licensing board for questionable notary practices, but nothing had stuck, because she was careful to only work with clients who seemed legitimate on the surface. Chelsea had provided the perfect cover story with her tears and staged grief over her supposedly dead sister. But here's what your sister didn't count on, Harold continued, spreading the documents across his mahogany desk. Military personnel overseas have specific legal protections under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. What she did isn't just fraud, it's a federal crime with severe penalties. As we dug deeper into the case, a pattern of systematic planning emerged that made my blood run cold. Phone records showed that Chelsea had been in contact with Jennifer Walsh for 6 months before my deployment even began. Bank records revealed that she'd been monitoring my accounts, watching my savings grow, calculating exactly how much she could steal. The conspiracy went even deeper than I'd imagined. Harold's private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Kate Morrison, uncovered Chelsea's boyfriend Troy Mason's involvement in the scheme. Troy had a criminal history including check fraud and identity theft, skills he'd apparently put to good use in crafting the fake documents. Worse yet, Kate's investigation revealed that my own cousin Marcus had provided Chelsea with copies of family documents and personal information needed to make the forgeries convincing. Your sister has been planning this for almost 2 years, Kate explained as she laid out a timeline of evidence. She started collecting your personal information after your grandmother's funeral, when the family was discussing inheritance. That's when she learned about your deployment plans and saw an opportunity. The financial trail was devastating. The $43,000 from my savings had been split 3 ways. $20,000 went to pay off Chelsea's gambling debts, at the Mountain View Casino, $15,000 funded Troy's failed auto repair business, and $8,000 paid for their 3-week vacation to Mexico that Chelsea had documented so thoroughly on social media. But the deepest cut came when Kate revealed what had happened to my grandmother's jewelry and family heirlooms that I'd stored in the house's safe. Chelsea had sold everything, including my grandmother's wedding ring and the antique necklace that had been in our family for 4 generations. Those items weren't just valuable, they were irreplaceable pieces of family history. She even sold your military commendation medal, Kate said quietly, showing me a receipt from a pawn shop in downtown Denver. Got $300 for it. The legal obstacles ahead seemed insurmountable. Harold explained that while the evidence was strong, prosecuting family fraud cases required proving intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Chelsea could claim she genuinely believed she was helping family, and juries were sometimes sympathetic to family members who made desperate decisions during crisis situations. The challenge, Harold said, is that she's established a narrative where she's the victim trying to help her family during a crisis. We need to prove this was premeditated theft, not a misguided attempt to help. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just pursuing legal remedies, I would investigate the conspiracy myself. My military training had taught me patience, attention to detail, and strategic thinking. Chelsea might have thought she was dealing with a grieving family member, but she was actually up against someone who'd spent years learning how to gather intelligence and plan complex operations. Agnes provided the first breakthrough when she mentioned seeing Chelsea and Troy at the house multiple times before my supposed death, taking measurements and photographing rooms like they were preparing for something. Other neighbors confirmed similar observations, building a timeline that proved the planning had started months before any supposed family emergency. The most damaging evidence came from social media. While Chelsea had been careful to hide her spending from family members, she couldn't resist documenting her new lifestyle online. Photos showed expensive restaurant meals, designer clothes, and luxury purchases, all time-stamped after my supposed death, but before any supposed emergency with Emma. As the true scope of the betrayal became clear, I felt something shift inside me. The grief and shock were hardening into something more dangerous, a cold, calculated desire for justice. Chelsea had declared war on my life, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly who she was fighting. Armed with evidence of the conspiracy, I launched a coordinated legal assault that would make Chelsea's comfortable life very uncomfortable very quickly. Harold filed fraud charges with the district attorney's office, property theft claims in civil court, and identity theft reports with both local and federal authorities. Each filing included meticulous documentation of the forged documents, financial records, and witness statements that proved premeditation. Kate's private investigation had uncovered enough evidence about Troy's criminal background to interest the FBI in his activities. His previous fraud convictions made him a repeat offender, subject to federal sentencing guidelines that could put him away for decades. More importantly, his involvement elevated Chelsea's crime from simple family fraud to organized criminal conspiracy. The first crack in Chelsea's facade came when Harold contacted the local news station about the story. Military fraud cases involving deployed service members made for compelling television, especially when they involved family betrayal and forged death certificates. Reporter Amanda Richardson jumped on the story immediately, recognizing its potential impact. "This isn't just about one family," Amanda explained during our interview. "This represents a pattern of fraud targeting military families that the public needs to understand." The story aired on the evening news with the headline, "Sister Steals Deployed Soldier's Life," accompanied by photos of my demolished house and Chelsea's Mexico vacation pictures. Chelsea's reaction was immediate and panicked. My phone started ringing constantly with her calls, each voicemail more desperate than the last. "Jasmine, you're destroying our family over a misunderstanding," she sobbed into the phone. I was trying to help. "Why won't you let me explain?" The performance might have worked on someone who didn't know the truth, but I'd seen the evidence of her planning. Troy's response was more direct and considerably more threatening. He showed up at the extended stay hotel where I was temporarily living, demanding that I drop the charges and stop making trouble for people trying to help. When I refused to let him in, he started pounding on the door, shouting threats about what happens to people who don't know when to quit. The intimidation campaign escalated when I found my rental car's windows smashed in the hotel parking lot, with a note tucked under the windshield wipers: "Drop it or things get worse." Instead of scaring me off, the threats only strengthened my resolve and provided more evidence for the criminal case. The investigation into Jennifer Walsh's notary practices revealed she'd been involved in similar fraud cases across 3 counties. Her notary license suspension became front-page news in the local legal journal, and her cooperation with authorities in exchange for reduced charges provided crucial testimony about how the forgeries were created. Chelsea knew exactly what she was doing, Jennifer admitted during her deposition. She brought me detailed plans about how to make the documents look legitimate, what information to include, even which type of paper to use. This wasn't someone making desperate decisions in an emergency. This was someone who'd done her research. The veteran community's response exceeded my expectations. The local VFW Post adopted my case as a cause, organizing fundraisers to help cover legal expenses and temporary housing costs. Vietnam veteran Bob Patterson, who'd fought his own family fraud case decades earlier, became an unofficial mentor and advocate. "What happened to you could happen to any of us," Bob told the gathered crowd at a VFW meeting. "When we're serving overseas, we trust our families to protect what we've built. When that trust is betrayed, the whole military community needs to stand together." The financial recovery process began slowly but steadily. My insurance company launched their own investigation into the fraudulent claims Chelsea had filed, which could result in additional restitution beyond what the courts might order. The Victim Compensation Fund provided emergency assistance for housing and basic needs while the legal process continued. Chelsea's carefully constructed social network started crumbling as news of the fraud spread through our hometown. Her employer, a local insurance agency, placed her on administrative leave pending investigation. Former friends began distancing themselves as details of the systematic planning became public. Even our extended family started choosing sides, with most expressing shock and disgust at the scope of the betrayal. The most significant breakthrough came when Agnes provided security footage from her home surveillance system that captured Troy and Chelsea entering my house multiple times during my deployment, clearly showing them loading boxes into a truck weeks before any supposed emergency occurred. The timestamps proved that the planning had been ongoing for months. As evidence mounted and public attention grew, I could see Chelsea's confidence beginning to crack. Her social media posts became increasingly defensive, filled with vague references to family misunderstandings and people who don't know the whole story. But the documents didn't lie, and the timeline of evidence painted a clear picture of calculated theft. Standing in Harold's office reviewing the mounting evidence, I realized we'd accomplished something important. Chelsea's narrative of being a helpful sister during a crisis was collapsing under the weight of proof that showed systematic, premeditated fraud. The first phase of justice was complete, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. Just when it seemed like justice was inevitable, Chelsea launched a desperate counterattack that nearly derailed everything I'd worked to build. Using the same systematic approach that had served her so well in the original fraud, she filed a restraining order against me, claiming I was mentally unstable and had been threatening her and her daughter Emma with violence. The petition was a masterpiece of manipulation, describing me as a disturbed veteran suffering from combat-related psychological issues, who had become obsessively vengeful over normal family financial decisions. She provided screenshots of text messages taken out of context, witness statements from friends who only knew her version of events, and even medical records from my military service that mentioned routine counseling sessions that all deployed personnel attended. "She's weaponizing the stigma around veteran mental health," Harold said grimly as we reviewed the restraining order paperwork. "This is exactly the kind of stereotype that makes military fraud cases difficult to prosecute. She's painting you as the unstable aggressor and herself as the protective mother." The court hearing was a carefully orchestrated performance. Chelsea arrived dressed conservatively in dark clothes, her hair pulled back severely, looking every inch the concerned mother protecting her child from a dangerous relative. She brought Emma with her, coaching the 8-year-old to look frightened whenever I entered the courtroom. Her supporting witnesses included her best friend Linda Kowalski, who testified about my erratic behavior at family gatherings, and her pastor, Reverend David Collins, who spoke about Chelsea's dedication to family and community service. None of them mentioned the evidence of fraud, focusing instead on portraying me as an unstable veteran who couldn't handle civilian life. "Your Honor," Chelsea's attorney argued, "my client is simply trying to protect herself and her young daughter from a family member whose military service has clearly affected her ability to process normal family situations rationally. The accusations of fraud are a manifestation of paranoid thinking that poses a real danger to my client's safety." The temporary restraining order was granted, prohibiting me from coming within 500 feet of Chelsea's residence, workplace, or Emma's school. Worse yet, the judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation to determine my mental fitness before the case could proceed. It felt like Chelsea had managed to turn the entire legal system against me using nothing but carefully crafted lies and social prejudices. Troy's criminal connections became more apparent as the harassment campaign intensified. My hotel room was broken into twice, with personal belongings scattered and legal documents photographed. Strange cars began following me to meetings with Harold and Kate. Anonymous phone calls warned me to drop the case before someone gets hurt permanently. The second devastating betrayal came from within my own family. My cousin Marcus, who I'd grown up with like a brother, called a family meeting to address the situation between Chelsea and me. I arrived expecting support from relatives who'd known me my entire life, only to walk into an intervention designed to convince me to drop the fraud charges. "Jasmine, honey, we know you've been through a lot overseas," my Aunt Patricia said gently, as if speaking to a confused child. "Sometimes trauma can make us see threats where none exist. Chelsea made some mistakes, but she's family. Can't we work this out without destroying each other?" Marcus had apparently spent weeks sharing Chelsea's version of events with our relatives, describing my accusations as the product of military-related mental health issues. He'd convinced most of the family that I was suffering from some form of combat trauma that made me paranoid and vindictive. "She's not the same person who left for deployment," Marcus told the assembled family members. "I've seen this before with other veterans. They come back changed, angry, unable to trust the people who love them most." The family meeting ended with most of our relatives expressing concern for my mental state while defending Chelsea's actions as those of a sister trying to help during a crisis. Only my Uncle Frank and his wife Susan expressed any skepticism about Chelsea's version of events, but even they encouraged me to seek counseling rather than pursue legal action. The professional sabotage campaign reached new lows when Chelsea contacted my former employer at the defense contractor, claiming I'd made threatening statements about violence and revenge. Although I'd already planned to transition to civilian employment, her calls raised questions about my security clearance and ability to work in sensitive positions. "We've received some concerning information about your mental state," my former supervisor, Colonel Patricia Wong, explained during a phone call. "While we appreciate your service, the company needs to be careful about potential liability issues. Perhaps it would be best if you sought some professional help before pursuing future opportunities with us." The isolation was becoming overwhelming. Friends who'd initially supported me began expressing doubts as Chelsea's narrative spread through our community. Social media posts that had started with expressions of outrage over the fraud slowly shifted to conversations about veteran mental health and the importance of family forgiveness. I found myself questioning everything as the pressure mounted. Maybe I was being too vindictive. Maybe this was just a family dispute that had gotten out of hand. Maybe the trauma of deployment had affected my judgment in ways I couldn't recognize. The gaslighting campaign was so systematic and thorough that even I began wondering if my perception of events was accurate. The breaking point came during a particularly brutal day, when the psychiatric evaluator questioned me about my revenge fantasies and obsessive behavior. The restraining order hearing was postponed indefinitely, and Troy left a voicemail describing in graphic detail what would happen if I continued causing problems for good people. Sitting alone in my hotel room that night, surrounded by legal documents and evidence that seemed increasingly meaningless in the face of Chelsea's successful character assassination, I seriously considered giving up. Maybe some battles weren't worth fighting. Maybe justice wasn't always possible. Maybe it was time to walk away and try to rebuild my life somewhere else. But then I remembered standing in that empty lot where my house used to be, holding Agnes's folder of evidence, making a promise to myself that Chelsea wouldn't get away with destroying my life. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The turning point came when Detective Rita Coleman knocked on my hotel room door at 7 a.m, introducing herself as a specialist in family fraud cases with the County Sheriff's Department. Rita had been following the media coverage of my case and recognized patterns that connected to a broader investigation she'd been conducting into organized fraud targeting military families. "Your sister's case isn't isolated," Rita explained as she spread files across my hotel room table. "We've identified at least 8 similar cases in the past 3 years, all involving deployed military personnel, all using the same notary services, and all following suspiciously similar patterns. Jennifer Walsh is just one piece of a larger criminal network." Rita's investigation had uncovered a systematic fraud operation that targeted military families specifically because of their vulnerability during deployment. The criminals had developed sophisticated methods for identifying high-value targets, creating convincing forged documents, and exploiting legal loopholes in estate law. Chelsea hadn't just betrayed her family, she'd connected with professional criminals. The breakthrough evidence came from an unexpected source: security footage from the bank where Chelsea had withdrawn my savings. Rita's subpoena had uncovered high-definition recordings that showed Chelsea, Troy, and Jennifer Walsh meeting in the bank's parking lot 3 days before the supposed family emergency, carefully coordinating their stories and dividing up forged documents. "Watch this," Rita said, pointing to the timestamp on the footage. "This meeting happened before any medical emergency with your niece, before any financial crisis, before any of the justifications your sister provided. This proves premeditation beyond any reasonable doubt." The computer forensics investigation provided even more damning evidence. Kate's technology expert had recovered deleted files from Troy's laptop that contained detailed plans for the fraud, including research into military deployment schedules, estate law procedures, and methods for creating convincing forged documents. The files included personal information about me that could only have come from Marcus, confirming his role in the conspiracy. Agnes's harassment escalated when Troy and his associates began intimidating other potential witnesses. Her home security cameras captured them vandalizing her garden and leaving threatening notes, but their tactics backfired when the police department increased patrol presence in the neighborhood and began treating the case as organized crime rather than simple family dispute. These people made a crucial mistake, Rita observed. They started targeting witnesses and law enforcement attention. That transforms this from a civil fraud case into a criminal conspiracy with federal implications. The legal strategy shifted dramatically with Rita's involvement. Instead of defending against Chelsea's psychological warfare, we went on the offensive with a comprehensive criminal investigation that included federal authorities. The FBI's white-collar crime division became interested when they learned about the multi-state fraud network and the systematic targeting of military families. Community mobilization reached new levels when the veteran support organizations realized the broader implications of the case. Bob Patterson organized a coalition of military family advocates, fraud victims, and concerned citizens that began pressuring elected officials to address weaknesses in legal protections for deployed service members. "This isn't just about Jasmine anymore," Bob announced at a packed community meeting. "This is about protecting every military family from criminals who specifically target them during service to our country. We need laws with teeth and enforcement that actually works." The media coverage expanded beyond local news when national veteran advocacy groups picked up the story. Amanda Richardson's investigation had uncovered the broader fraud network, making my case the focal point of a larger expose about crimes against military families. The national attention brought resources and expert support that transformed the legal battle. Chelsea's support network finally began collapsing under the weight of evidence. Troy was arrested on outstanding warrants during a traffic stop, and his subsequent plea bargain revealed additional details about the fraud network that implicated Chelsea in other crimes. Jennifer Walsh agreed to testify against Chelsea in exchange for reduced charges, providing insider details about how the forged documents were created. The most significant breakthrough came when Marcus, faced with federal conspiracy charges, broke down and confessed his role in the scheme. During a tearful interview with Rita, he revealed that Chelsea had been planning the fraud for over 2 years, systematically gathering information and preparing for my deployment. She knew everything about Jasmine's finances, her deployment schedule, even her military benefits, Marcus admitted. "She made it sound like we were helping family, but I realize now it was always about the money. She promised me $10,000 for helping, but she never paid me anything." The psychiatric evaluation that Chelsea had demanded worked in my favor when Dr. Emily Harrison's comprehensive assessment found no evidence of mental instability, combat trauma, or impaired judgment. Her report specifically noted my remarkable resilience and clear thinking under extreme stress, and recommended that the restraining order be dismissed immediately. Ms. Parker shows no signs of the psychological instability alleged by the petitioner, Dr. Harrison wrote in her report. On the contrary, her systematic approach to gathering evidence and pursuing legal remedies demonstrates exceptional mental clarity and emotional stability under circumstances that would challenge anyone's psychological resources. The asset freezing order finally came through when federal authorities seized all of Chelsea's bank accounts, property, and assets pending criminal trial. Her comfortable lifestyle disappeared overnight as her credit cards were cancelled, her mortgage payments stopped, and her access to the stolen money was completely blocked. Standing in Rita's office, reviewing the mountain of evidence we'd accumulated, I realized that Chelsea's attempted character assassination had actually strengthened our case. Her desperate tactics had drawn federal attention, revealed the broader criminal network, and provided additional charges that carried serious federal penalties. The hunter had become the hunted. With overwhelming evidence compiled and federal charges pending, Rita proposed a strategy that would give us the final proof needed to ensure Chelsea's conviction: a controlled confrontation designed to capture her confession on record. The plan required me to approach Chelsea with an apparent olive branch, pretending that I was tired of fighting and wanted to reconcile with family. She's desperate enough now that she might admit things she'd never say otherwise, Rita explained as we reviewed the wiretap equipment. Her assets are frozen, Troy is cooperating with prosecutors, and the federal charges carry decades in prison. If you approach her with what seems like an opportunity to resolve everything quietly, she might reveal information we still need. The approach had to be carefully orchestrated to avoid entrapment claims. I would contact Chelsea, genuinely seeking reconciliation, expressing exhaustion with the legal battle and desire to rebuild family relationships. If she chose to confess or provide incriminating information during our conversation, that would be admissible evidence. If she maintained her innocence, we'd simply proceed with the existing case. Harold worried about my safety during the confrontation, but Rita's team had developed comprehensive security measures. Undercover officers would be positioned throughout the restaurant where we'd meet, backup teams would monitor from vehicles outside, and the wiretap equipment would provide real-time audio to the surveillance team. Remember, Rita coached me before the meeting, your goal is reconciliation, not confession. Let her tell you whatever she wants to tell you. Don't ask leading questions, or try to trap her into admissions. Just listen and respond naturally to whatever she says. The meeting was set for Bella Vista Restaurant, a family establishment where Chelsea had suggested we could talk privately about moving forward. I arrived early, checking the wire equipment one final time, and reviewing the conversation strategy with Rita's team through a discreet earpiece. Chelsea arrived 30 minutes late, looking haggard and nervous in a way I'd never seen before. The confident, manipulative sister had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely frightened about her future. She immediately launched into an emotional performance about how much she'd missed our relationship, and how sorry she was that things had gotten so complicated. I never wanted any of this legal stuff, she said, tears streaming down her face. I just made some mistakes trying to help family during a crisis, and now everyone's treating me like some kind of criminal. Can't we just work this out between sisters? For nearly an hour, she maintained the facade of innocent mistakes and family emergency, sticking to the same story she'd been telling for months. But as the conversation continued and she realized I seemed genuinely interested in reconciliation, her guard began to drop. The desperation of her situation started showing through the careful performance. The truth is, Jasmine, I was in real trouble, she finally admitted, her voice breaking. Troy had gotten us into debt with some dangerous people, and they were threatening Emma. When I saw how much money you had just sitting there while you were gone, it seemed like the only solution. I thought I could pay everything back before you returned and you'd never know. The confession started slowly, but gained momentum as Chelsea seemed relieved to finally tell someone the truth about what had happened. She described the months of planning, Troy's role in creating the forged documents, Jennifer Walsh's cooperation in notarizing fraudulent paperwork, and Marcus's assistance in gathering personal information. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. I thought I could sell the house, pay off the debts, and figure out how to explain everything when you got back. But then the developer went bankrupt and the money got tied up, and Troy said we needed to make sure you couldn't prove anything. So we had to stick with the story about you being dead. The most damning admission came when she described the systematic nature of the planning. We researched everything about deployment procedures, estate law, even military benefits to make sure we could access everything. Troy found other cases online where people had done similar things, so we knew it was possible if we were careful enough. She revealed additional crimes that hadn't been discovered yet, including filing fraudulent insurance claims on belongings that she'd actually sold, submitting false tax returns claiming me as deceased, and even attempting to claim my VA benefits through forged paperwork that hadn't been processed yet. I know you probably hate me, Chelsea concluded, but I'm begging you to help me find a way out of this. The lawyers say I could go to prison for decades, and Emma would lose her mother. There has to be some way we can work together to fix this mess. Rita's voice came through my earpiece. Perfect. We have everything we need. Start wrapping up the conversation naturally. I looked across the table at my sister, this person who had systematically planned to destroy my life for money, who had forged my death certificate and sold our grandmother's jewelry, who had spent months gaslighting me and trying to convince everyone I was mentally unstable. The woman sitting there was a stranger wearing my sister's face. Chelsea, I said quietly, I forgive you. Her face lit up with hope until I continued. But forgiveness doesn't mean there won't be consequences for what you've done. The recording equipment had captured everything, the admission of premeditated fraud, the confession of systematic planning, the revelation of additional crimes, and most importantly, the complete destruction of her defense strategy. There would be no more claims of family emergency or innocent mistakes. As I left the restaurant, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The sister I'd grown up with was gone, replaced by someone whose greed and selfishness had destroyed our family. But justice was finally within reach, and the evidence needed to ensure her conviction was now complete. The trial proceedings moved swiftly once Chelsea's recorded confession eliminated any possibility of maintaining her innocence. Her defense attorney, realizing the hopelessness of their position, attempted to negotiate a plea bargain that would reduce her sentence in exchange for cooperation with federal investigators pursuing the broader fraud network. 27 felony counts including conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, document forgery, and money laundering, the prosecutor announced during the arraignment. The defendant faces a potential sentence of up to 4 to 5 years in federal prison, with mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines that prevent probation for these types of organized financial crimes. The victim impact statements phase of the trial gave me the opportunity to address Chelsea directly about the destruction she'd caused. Standing before the packed courtroom, looking at my sister seated at the defendant's table, I spoke about the betrayal that went far beyond financial theft. Your Honor, Chelsea didn't just steal my house and money, I testified. She stole my sense of family, my trust in the people closest to me, and my faith that service to country would be respected by those I left behind. She forced me to choose between seeking justice and preserving family relationships, knowing that either choice would cause permanent damage. Agnes's testimony proved particularly powerful, as she described watching Chelsea organize my memorial service while secretly planning to steal everything I owned. The elderly woman's voice shook with emotion as she recounted how Chelsea had manipulated the entire neighborhood's grief for her own criminal purposes. She let us plant roses for a dead woman while she was counting the money from selling that woman's house, Agnes told the jury. I've never seen such calculated cruelty disguised as family concern. The financial restitution calculation revealed the true scope of the theft: $137,000 including the house sale proceeds, drained bank accounts, sold personal belongings, fraudulent insurance claims, and accumulated interest. The judge ordered full restitution plus punitive damages, totaling over $200,000. Troy's sentencing came first, with his cooperation in the federal investigation earning him a reduced sentence of 8 years in federal prison. His testimony about the fraud network provided crucial evidence that led to arrests in 6 other states, dismantling an operation that had targeted dozens of military families. Jennifer Walsh received 3 years probation and permanent revocation of her notary license in exchange for her cooperation and testimony about the document forgery process. Her detailed explanation of how the fraudulent paperwork was created provided the technical evidence needed to prove the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy. Marcus's sentence reflected his cooperation, and relatively minor role in the scheme, 2 years probation, community service, and restitution for his share of the stolen money. His testimony had been crucial in establishing the timeline of planning and Chelsea's leadership role in organizing the crime. Chelsea's sentencing hearing stretched across 2 days as the judge considered the complexity of the case and the impact on victims. Character witnesses attempted to portray her as a loving mother who had made desperate mistakes, but the systematic planning revealed in the evidence contradicted any claims of impulsive decision-making. Ms. Parker, Judge William Crawford addressed Chelsea during sentencing, "You have committed crimes that strike at the heart of our social contract with military families. While these brave individuals serve our country overseas, they depend on legal protections and family loyalty to safeguard their interests at home. Your betrayal represents a fundamental violation of that trust." The final sentence was 15 years in federal prison with supervised release, forfeiture of all assets obtained through the fraud, and permanent prohibition from serving as executor or administrator for any estate. The judge's statement emphasized that the lengthy sentence was necessary to deter similar crimes against military families. "Let this case serve as a warning," Judge Crawford concluded. "Those who prey upon our service members and their families will face the full weight of federal prosecution and the most severe penalties allowed under law." The property recovery process began immediately following sentencing. The developer who had purchased my house had declared bankruptcy, making the lot available for purchase at a fraction of its original value. Insurance settlements and restitution payments provided the funds needed to rebuild, this time with security features that would prevent future fraud. Chelsea's final manipulation attempt came through jailhouse phone calls that were recorded and monitored. Her conversations with family members revealed continued efforts to portray herself as the victim of overzealous prosecution and vindictive relatives. She showed no genuine remorse, only anger about being caught and punished. "I can't believe Jasmine destroyed our entire family over money," she complained to our cousin during one recorded call. "If she'd just worked with me instead of involving lawyers and police, we could have figured everything out quietly." The community response to the conviction included a formal commendation from the mayor's office recognizing my perseverance in seeking justice despite attempts at intimidation and character assassination. Local veteran organizations cited the case as an example of why legal protections for deployed service members needed strengthening. Standing outside the courthouse after sentencing, surrounded by supporters who had stood with me throughout the legal battle, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but at the cost of family relationships that could never be repaired. The investigation's impact extended far beyond my individual case, leading to federal legislation strengthening protections for deployed military personnel and their assets. The Chelsea Parker Military Family Protection Act became law 8 months later, closing legal loopholes that had made the fraud possible. 2 years after standing in that empty lot where my house used to be, I watched construction workers install the final piece of roofing on my new home. The insurance settlements, restitution payments, and victim compensation funds had provided enough money to build something even better than what I had lost, but more importantly, the legal victory had given me back my sense of justice and personal agency. The new house included security features that would prevent future fraud, biometric locks, comprehensive surveillance systems, and legal safeguards that required multiple forms of verification for any financial transactions. Agnes had enthusiastically supported the construction project, joking that she'd finally have interesting neighbors again, after 2 years of staring at an empty lot. "It's beautiful, honey," Agnes said as we stood in my new kitchen, looking out at the garden where volunteers had planted replacement roses in honor of the fraudulent memorial service. "But I'm even more proud of how you fought for it. A lot of people would have given up when things got difficult." The financial recovery had exceeded expectations as the federal investigation uncovered additional assets that Chelsea had hidden in offshore accounts. The final restitution amount reached $350,000, providing not only full compensation for my losses, but substantial funds for building a more secure future. My professional life had rebounded stronger than before as media coverage of the case attracted attention from law firms specializing in fraud prevention and victim advocacy. My combination of military experience, first-hand fraud knowledge, and proven determination made me a valuable consultant for other military families facing similar crimes. You understand both the legal complexity and the emotional impact in ways that most attorneys never could, Harold explained as he offered me a position with his firm. Fraud victims need advocates who've walked in their shoes and know what it takes to fight back against professional criminals. The work provided deep satisfaction, as I helped other families navigate the legal system after discovering financial betrayal. Each case reinforced my appreciation for the justice I'd achieved while revealing how many military families suffered similar violations without the resources or support needed to fight back effectively. Agnes had become the family I'd chosen to replace the one I'd lost. Our relationship deepened beyond neighborly friendship into something approaching a grandmother-granddaughter bond. She attended court hearings, celebrated legal victories, and provided emotional support during the darkest moments of the legal battle. Family isn't about blood, Agnes observed during one of our evening conversations. It's about people who show up when you need them most. Chelsea shared your DNA, but I'm the one who saved those documents and stood by you when everything fell apart. Dating had been challenging as the trauma of betrayal made trusting new people difficult. But gradually, carefully, I began building relationships with people who understood and respected the journey I'd traveled. My current relationship with Michael, a fellow veteran who worked in cybersecurity, was built on mutual respect and shared experiences of overcoming adversity. The therapeutic work I'd done to process the trauma wasn't about forgetting what happened, but rather about preventing Chelsea's betrayal from poisoning my ability to trust and connect with others. Dr. Sarah Martinez helped me understand the difference between healthy caution and destructive suspicion. Betrayal trauma is real, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. When someone we trust completely violates that trust, it affects our ability to feel safe in relationships. The goal isn't to return to naive trust, but to develop discernment that protects you while still allowing meaningful connections. Chelsea's prison letters continued sporadically, still attempting manipulation even from behind bars. The messages alternated between fake apologies, attempts to blame others for her crimes, and requests for financial support for Emma. I'd learned to recognize the patterns and respond with appropriate boundaries. I've had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, read her latest letter, and I realize now that Troy manipulated me into doing things I never would have considered on my own. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive a sister who was taken advantage of by dangerous people. The lack of genuine accountability in her communications reinforced my decision to maintain no contact. Forgiveness didn't require ongoing relationship with someone who remained fundamentally unchanged by consequences. Some boundaries existed for protection, not punishment. The broader impact of the case continued expanding through my advocacy work with veteran organizations and legislative committees working on military family protection laws. The testimony I provided about my experience helped secure funding for legal assistance programs and fraud prevention education specifically targeting military families. Your case demonstrated gaps in our legal protections that we never fully understood before, Congressman James Wilson told me during a committee hearing. The legislation we've passed, because of your advocacy, will protect thousands of families from experiencing similar betrayals. Career advancement accelerated as my expertise in fraud prevention and victim advocacy became recognized throughout the legal community. Speaking engagements at law schools, military bases, and professional conferences provided platforms to share lessons learned and prevention strategies with audiences who could implement systemic changes. The most meaningful recognition came from families I'd helped navigate their own fraud cases. Their success stories and expressions of gratitude provided daily reminders that my traumatic experience had been transformed into something that could protect and empower others facing similar challenges. Standing in my rebuilt home, surrounded by chosen family and meaningful work, I realized that Chelsea's betrayal had ultimately led to a life richer and more purposeful than anything I'd originally planned. The destruction had cleared space for building something stronger, more secure, and more aligned with my values than what had existed before. 5 years have passed since I stood in that empty lot holding a foreclosure notice, and today I received notification that Chelsea is eligible for parole review. The victim impact statement I'll provide won't be driven by anger or revenge, but by a clear understanding of accountability, justice, and protection for potential future victims. The parole hearing represents an opportunity to ensure that the lessons of this case aren't forgotten, and that appropriate safeguards remain in place. My statement will focus on the systematic nature of the crime, the impact on military families, and the importance of genuine rehabilitation before release is considered. Parole should require demonstrating understanding of the crime's impact and implementing changes that prevent recurrence, I wrote in my statement. Chelsea's communications from prison suggest continued manipulation attempts and failure to accept full responsibility for the premeditated nature of her crimes. The forgiveness journey has been complex and ongoing, requiring careful distinction between personal healing and public accountability. Forgiving Chelsea became necessary for my own psychological freedom, but forgiveness didn't eliminate the need for appropriate consequences or future prevention measures. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that healthy forgiveness meant releasing the anger that was poisoning my own life, while maintaining appropriate boundaries and supporting systems that protect others from similar harm. The two concepts weren't contradictory, but rather complementary aspects of moving forward constructively. True forgiveness, Dr. Martinez explained, creates space for healing without requiring relationship restoration or consequence elimination. You can forgive someone while still supporting their continued imprisonment, if that's what public safety requires. The life I've built reflects lessons learned about trust, family, and personal strength. My marriage to Michael 3 years ago created a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and complete financial transparency. Our relationship demonstrates that betrayal trauma doesn't have to prevent future healthy connections. Our home has become a gathering place for chosen family including Agnes, veteran friends, colleagues from my fraud prevention work, and other survivors of family financial crimes. The kitchen table where Chelsea's betrayal was first revealed through forged documents now hosts celebrations, planning sessions, and support conversations for people rebuilding after devastating losses. The professional impact of my advocacy work continues expanding as the Chelsea Parker Military Family Protection Act has prevented hundreds of similar crimes through strengthened verification requirements and enhanced penalties for targeting deployed service members. Legislative success provides concrete evidence that individual trauma can be transformed into systemic protection for others. Your case created a blueprint that families across the country now use to protect themselves and fight back when they are victimized, Attorney General Patricia Hayes told me during a recent conference on military family legal protections. The changes you've helped implement will protect people for generations. The scholarship fund established in my grandmother's memory provides assistance for military families pursuing legal education, creating pathways for future advocates who understand these issues personally. Each recipient represents an investment in ongoing protection and support for vulnerable families. The speaking engagements and consulting work have evolved beyond individual case assistance to include training programs for legal professionals, social workers, and military family support personnel. The curriculum covers recognition of financial abuse patterns, intervention strategies, and resources for prevention and recovery. Emma, now 13, occasionally sends cards through supervised visitation programs. Her communications reflect a young person trying to understand complex adult failures while maintaining hope for family healing. My responses focus on supporting her emotional development, without either defending or attacking her mother's choices. Agnes, now 83, remains my closest confidant and chosen family member. Her wisdom about resilience, community, and the difference between family by birth and family by choice continues shaping my understanding of healthy relationships. Her garden has become a symbol of beauty growing from difficult soil. Honey, you took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into the best thing you ever did for others, Agnes observed during our recent conversation. That's not just survival, that's transformation. The lessons learned extend beyond legal and financial protection to include understanding of human psychology, manipulation techniques, and early warning signs of financial abuse. These insights inform both personal relationships and professional work with families navigating complex betrayal situations. Looking toward the future, my goals include expanding the fraud prevention education programs, supporting legislation in additional states, and continuing individual case assistance for military families. The work provides daily meaning and connects my personal experience to broader social protection efforts. The ultimate lesson from this journey is that betrayal reveals character, but doesn't determine destiny. Chelsea's choices showed who she really was beneath the family facade, but my response demonstrated who I chose to become when faced with devastating loss and systematic manipulation. Justice wasn't just about punishment or financial recovery, though both were important. True justice meant transforming a personal trauma into protective systems that prevent others from experiencing similar devastation. The empty lot where my house once stood is now home to a family who benefits from legal protections that didn't exist before my case. What would I tell someone facing similar betrayal by family members? Document everything, seek professional help immediately, don't let manipulation campaigns prevent you from pursuing justice, and remember that healing requires both accountability for perpetrators and support for survivors. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How did you handle the balance between forgiveness and accountability? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember that speaking up about these experiences helps protect others from similar harm. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help it reach other people who might need to hear that justice is possible even after devastating family betrayal. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming adversity and rebuilding after betrayal, and don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding that they're not alone in facing these challenges. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember that your worst day doesn't determine your best future. Sometimes the people who hurt us most give us the opportunity to become stronger than we ever imagined possible. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who truly deserve your trust.